Well, here we are on the outskirts of Rome at a track called Malagrotta, which is a 9-time world motocross champion Antonio Caroli's home track, and we're here for the 2019 model KTM motocross range launch, both the 2-strokes and 4-strokes. So, you know, three bikes in the 2-stroke range: the 125, the 150, and the 250, and then the 250, 350, 450, obviously in the 4-stroke range. Last night it was actually awesome. We had a video presentation by both Caroli and Ryan Dungey, and then Dungey appeared from side stage and actually unveiled the bike, which is pretty cool. Ryan's been out here today testing and joining. We've got about 30 or 40 crew out here at the track, as I say, not far away from Rome. Really fitting actually that Dungey's been involved, because, you know, the guy, when he took a leap of faith back then in 2012, you know, on a bike that back then was, you know, really by all intents and purposes a really kind of substandard and overweight 450 relative to all the other Japanese bikes, and to see how far they've come, and he's been a really big part of that process. So let's put a little bit of context around these bikes. You know, when you look at the last big upgrade on these bikes, the last new generation was 2016. So you got those bikes that came out with completely new frames, completely new suspension, completely new bodywork, and completely new engines. They epitomise, I guess, new generation more than any other sort of model range that you probably have seen before. So, you know, in the time since, so between 2016 and 19, you know, we've had, I guess, the Air Fork, you know, arrived in American and Australian models anyway in 2016. In 2017, the counterweight 2-stroke engine arrived on the 250SX. But besides that, it's largely been sort of refinements between then and now. So let's have a look at what are these 2019 models. Are they another new generation? Well, I guess some of the marketing guff is trying to call it new generation. And I'm not trying to undersell that, but I think you probably, well, it's certainly more than refinements, put it that way. And I think the way that KTM talks about it is these bikes are an evolution of that platform that we saw back in 2016. But I think, really, to be fair, you know, when you say it's not just, it's a big evolution. I think when you look at the collective upgrades that they've done across their frame, engine, bodywork, seat, and a whole lot of other little extras, you know, you've ended up with bikes that evolved a long way since that 2016 platform. And again, to put some context around that, you know, the 450SX now, SXF, is the lightest bike in the class at 100 kilos with fluid and no fuel, which is just phenomenal. Not the fact that it's just that weight, but the next lightest bike in the 450 class, you know, is a Kawasaki at about 104.5, 105 kilos. Other bikes sit up to, you know, like the Suzuki at about, I think, 8.8 kilos over it. So that's really significant. You know, right across the entire range of 2-stroke and 4-stroke, they're the most powerful bikes in their class. And when you got lightest, most powerful, it's a pretty good combination from a power to weight ratio. And the central focus, obviously, with KTM, I guess, over the last few years has been to making the bikes really rideable as well. No, it's not new generation. Yes, it's an evolution. Yes, it's a really serious evolution. But let's have a look quickly through, you know, some of the bits and pieces that they've actually done, the main bits and pieces that they've done to these 2019 bikes. So, sort of starting off with the frame, you know, they've basically modified the frame significantly, so that it's now about between 10 and 15% more torsionally stiff, depending on the model. They've kept the longitudinal stiffness the same. They've actually done quite a few mods to the triple clamps to complement that, and obviously quite a few tweaks with both the fork and the shock to complement that. The engines, well, let's look at the sort of 2-strokes. I guess, so firstly, there's been a huge amount of work with you know, with the pipes. There's been a lot of work with the jetting, with the clutch. So that's quite new in the 2-strokes. On the 4-stroke side, there's again been sweeping changes to the engines. And the reason I say it's not new generation is you haven't had those changes in the rotating masses of the clutch and the clutch shaft and the crankcases. So it's not significant in that respect, but there's been massive amount of change, particularly in the cylinder heads on the 350 and on the 450. And just to give you some idea, I mean, the cam chain, for instance, you know, when you have a look at the head on the 450, it's come down by 30 millimeters. So, you know, that's some of the start of the mass centralisation. But I think for me, as much as all those, you know, the suspension's great, the stability and the accuracy of the steering with the new frames in combination with the triple clamps and suspension, as much as that's all very precise and the engines are super rideable, I think probably the big thing for me is the changes to the ergonomics. A lot of those born of changes to the way the exhaust come out of the frame, which has allowed them to lower the radiators. That's allowed them to lower the tank significantly, and the radiators. The bike's exactly the same through the guts here, but a lot sort of slimmer through the rear end section, and that's also been accommodated or wrapped around. A lot of work done to both for the entire exhaust pipe, you know, including the muffler. And it's also kind of handy now that the flange on the muffler is halfway through, so it's a lot easier to remove your shock without having to do so much work on your exhaust pipe to get the thing out. And then there's the seat. KTM's never been renowned for probably having the best or most comfortable seats in the market, but I think they've done some amazing work on this one, and you know, finding out a bit of the backstory about how much work they put into actually changing the seat to make it it's a lot softer, smoother, and it's got these little silicone beads on here to make it a whole lot grippier. So it's been a really good test day here. We had a little bit of rain. It's been an amazing track. They prepped it, you know, as most KTM launches are. It's been a lot of fun. Did a lot of laps on all the bikes. So what we're going to do is on the website have some more detail about the performance of each of those particular models. We've also managed to talk to all the design team here, the guys who are responsible for the chassis, for the engine, Yoki Sauer, who's in charge, oversees the entire product development and communicating that to the media, and also the guys from WP here as well, who are a really collaborative effort in terms of what they do with the chassis. So we're going to have a bunch of those stories, a bunch of those interviews with those guys, a bunch of insights into, you know, how each of these models perform specifically. So keep an eye on the website in the coming weeks for all that.